What happens when words never meant for the world suddenly find their way into it? That is the question that sent shockwaves through fan communities when reports began circulating that private love letters written by Lee Min-ho to Song Hye-kyo had surfaced online. Not scripted lines from a drama, not carefully crafted public statements, but deeply personal words written in moments of quiet vulnerability. Words that were never meant to be read by anyone else. The story, as it unfolded, carried a sense of both fascination and discomfort. Because while fans were drawn to the emotional depth of what was being revealed, there was also an unspoken understanding. These letters belonged to a private world, a space where two people could speak freely without the weight of public interpretation. And now that space had been broken open. According to early reports, the letters did not emerge all at once. Instead, fragments began appearing across different online platforms. A sentence here, a paragraph there, each piece offering a glimpse into a side of Lee Min-ho that few had ever seen before. Gone was the polished image of the global star. In its place was something far more human. A man expressing his thoughts without filters, without performance, without the need to impress anyone. One of the first excerpts that gained attention was described as a reflection on time. In it, Lee Min-ho reportedly wrote about how quickly moments pass when they are shared with someone who truly understands you. He spoke about conversations that felt too short, even when they lasted for hours, about silence that felt comfortable rather than empty, and about the quiet realization that certain people have the ability to change the way time itself feels. For fans reading those words, the reaction was immediate, because the tone did not feel like something written for public admiration. It felt real. Another excerpt, which quickly spread across social media, revealed something even more personal. Lee Min-ho reportedly described the early days of their connection. The uncertainty, the hesitation, the memory of being turned down. But instead of expressing disappointment, the letter focused on gratitude. He wrote about how that rejection had given him the chance to understand her more deeply, to appreciate her boundaries, to learn patience. For many fans, that perspective was unexpected, because it transformed what could have been a painful memory into something meaningful, something necessary. As more fragments surfaced, a pattern began to emerge. These were not letters written to impress. They were written to connect. Each one carried a sense of honesty that felt almost rare in a world where public figures are constantly aware of how their words might be perceived. In one particularly emotional passage, Lee Min-ho reportedly wrote about watching Song Hye-kyo during a difficult moment. He described seeing strength in her even when she felt vulnerable. He wrote about wanting to protect her, not from the world itself, but from the weight the world sometimes placed on her shoulders. And perhaps most strikingly, he expressed a desire to simply stand beside her, not as a hero, not as someone trying to fix everything, but as someone who would remain present, no matter how complicated life became. For many fans, that passage became the most talked about part of the entire story, because it revealed a kind of love that is rarely spoken about so openly, a love that is not defined by grand gestures, but by quiet commitment. As the letters continued circulating, reactions began to shift from curiosity to emotion. Fans who had followed their story for years suddenly felt as though they were witnessing something deeply personal, something that went beyond headlines and public appearances. Many described feeling moved in a way they had not expected, because the letters did not feel like fiction. They felt like truth. Yet alongside that emotional response, another conversation began to grow. Questions about privacy, about boundaries, about whether such personal words should ever have been shared with the world. Some fans expressed discomfort, arguing that no matter how beautiful the letters were, they were never meant to be public. Others found themselves conflicted, moved by the words, but aware that reading them came at the cost of someone else's private space. Through it all, one thing remained clear. The letters had revealed something that no public statement ever could. They had revealed intention. The kind that exists when no one is watching. The kind that is not shaped by expectation or performance. And perhaps that is why the story resonated so deeply. Because in a world where so much is curated and controlled, These letters felt unfiltered. They offered a glimpse into what love looks like when it is not being observed, when it is simply being lived. As the conversation continued, many fans came to a quiet conclusion. The most powerful part of the story was not the fact that the letters had been leaked. It was what they contained. A reminder that behind the fame, behind the carefully managed images, there are moments of genuine emotion that exist far away from the public eye. Moments that are not meant to be shared. But when they are, even unintentionally, they reveal something undeniable. That love, in its truest form, does not need an audience. It only needs two people willing to express it honestly, even if those words were never meant to be heard by anyone else. And yet, as the fragments of those letters continued to circulate, a deeper question began to take hold across the world. Not about what was written, but about what it meant. Because for many, the words attributed to Lee Min-ho did more than reveal affection for Song Hye-kyo. They revealed a philosophy of love that felt almost forgotten in a world driven by speed, visibility, and performance. As more excerpts surfaced, one detail became increasingly clear. The letters were not written all at once. They spanned time, different moments, different emotional states. Some carried the quiet uncertainty of beginnings. Others reflected the calm certainty that comes when two people have already found their rhythm. And within that timeline, fans began to trace the evolution of something real. In one widely discussed passage, Lee Min-ho reportedly wrote about distance. Not physical distance, but emotional distance. He described how, in the early days, there were moments when he felt close to Song Hye-kyo, and moments when she seemed far away, even when they were in the same room. But instead of interpreting that distance as rejection, he wrote about learning to respect it. To understand that closeness cannot be forced. It must be invited. For many who read those words, the impact was immediate, because it challenged a common idea about love. The idea that persistence means pushing forward no matter what. Instead, these letters suggested something different. That true connection requires patience, awareness, and the willingness to step back when necessary. Another passage, quieter but no less powerful, reportedly described a moment of silence they shared together. No conversation, no distractions, just presence. Lee Min-ho wrote about how that silence felt more meaningful than words, how it revealed a level of comfort that could not be created artificially, and how, in that moment, he realized that what they were building was not temporary. It was something lasting. For fans, that idea resonated deeply, because silence in a relationship is often misunderstood. It can feel uncomfortable, empty. But in this case, it was the opposite. It was full of understanding, full of trust. As discussions around the letters continued, another layer of meaning began to emerge. People started noticing what was not in the letters. There were no exaggerated promises, no dramatic declarations meant to impress, no attempts to create a perfect image. Instead, the tone remained grounded, honest, almost simple. And that simplicity became the most powerful part of all, because it suggested that the connection between them was not built on illusion. It was built on reality, on shared experiences, on mutual respect, on the quiet effort of showing up day after day. But as the emotional impact of the letters grew, so did the conversation about the circumstances surrounding their release. Fans began questioning how such personal words had found their way into the public space. Speculation spread quickly. Some believed the letters had been shared unintentionally. Others wondered if someone close to the situation had revealed them. And with that speculation came a growing sense of protectiveness. Because for all the beauty contained within those words, there was also a clear truth. They were never meant for the world. They were meant for one person, for Song Hye-kyo. And that realization added a layer of complexity to the story. A mixture of admiration and discomfort. People were moved by what they read, but they were also aware that they were witnessing something private, something that belonged to a space they were never meant to enter. Amid that tension, one perspective began to stand out. The idea that perhaps the most respectful way to respond to the letters was not to analyze every word, but to understand their essence, to recognize what they represented without needing to examine every detail. Because at their core, the letters told a simple story. Not of perfection, but of effort. Not of grand gestures, but of quiet consistency. Not of a love that demanded attention, but of a love that existed even when no one was watching. And perhaps that is why, despite the controversy, the story continued to resonate. Because it reminded people of something fundamental. That behind every public figure is a private world filled with emotions that cannot be staged. Moments that cannot be rehearsed. And words that are not meant to be performed. In the end, the letters became more than just a viral story. They became a reflection. A reflection of what love can look like when it is honest. When it is patient. When it is allowed to grow without pressure. And as the noise around the story slowly began to fade, one quiet thought remained. Some of the most meaningful words in the world are not the ones that are heard by millions. They are the ones written for one person, and meant to stay there,